creates the wealth and then redistributes it. But there are many kinds of socialism. There's the Marxian scientific socialism, the Soviet socialism of Stalin, there's the National Socialism of Hitler, democratic socialism. But in each case, the essential characteristic of socialism is that the individual is subordinate to society. As the Germans said, Gemeinnutz, the Nazis said Gemeinnutz, geht for Eigennutz, that the common interest goes before the individual interest. And they posit this mystic entity, whether it's called the Third Reich, or the people, or the Commonwealth, and in effect, the government or the mystic order becomes the boss. The individual is a creature of this mystic order. And as a consequence, in a socialist society, you're always conscious of the presence of the masters. When you're behind the Iron Curtain, you're conscious of the presence of the masters. This mystic entity is posited as a savior to the people. It's actually above the people. And on this side, the individual is the important economic unit. And as George Washington was supposed to have said in the farewell address, that government, like fire, can be a useful servant, but a terrible master. And the question is the government the servant, or is the government the master? And the tendency is in the socialist societies, the government is the master, and in the free societies, the government is the servant. That's the way it started. Now, so the philosopher of the free society, the economic philosopher, you could say, was Adam Smith, and the philosopher of the collectivist societies tended to be Karl Marx. There were two gentlemen named John from Geneva, John Calvin, who said that man is corrupt, fallen in the Garden of Eden, and that he is self-interested. And there's Jean-Jacques Rousseau, also from Geneva, who said that man in his original state was kind of a noble savage, and that he was only corrupted by the institutions of civilization, by private ownership of the means of production, by property. And then the communist Proudhon, in that same vein, said, what is property? Property is theft. And I've always wanted to ask Proudhon if I could have a chance to speak with him. If you're opposed to theft, why, you must think a person has a right to his property. It's kind of a contradictory and puzzling statement. But he said property is theft. So Adam Smith, the philosopher of freedom, Karl Marx, the philosopher of socialism. They would both profess to the same goals as far as society, the good society, good wages, peace, prosperity. And Adam Smith would say the same thing, but they would take very different approaches to this society. Well, we have different fears, and I want to demonstrate to you that the fears of the collectivists are false, and that the fears of the individualists are valid. If we go back into history of economic thought, it puzzled the philosophers for years as to what created value, what gave a thing its value. If you studied economic history, you remember the scholastics. Even the early Greeks couldn't discover what gave a thing its value. This tape recorder, why is it what it's worth? The chair, the shoes you wear, what gives them their value? The Greeks never solved the puzzle of value. The scholastics, Martin Luther, Thomas Aquinas, talked about the just price. And what indeed gives a thing its value? Why should milk be worth more than gasoline? Or gasoline worth more or less than beer? Why should a thing have its value? Adam Smith thought that he had found an answer to this puzzle. Now, Smith, in his famous book, The Wealth of Nations, said that every individual labors to render the revenue of society as great as he can. He indeed neither intends to promote the public interest, nor knows how much he is promoting it. He intends only his own gain, and he is in this, as in many other cases, led by an invisible hand to promote an end which was no part of his intention. It's this famous phrase, the invisible hand. Adam Smith would say there's a spontaneous order in society. And Smith then tried to discover what caused value, what gave a thing its value, and he came up with an answer that satisfied Smith at least. And he said, at all times and places, that is dear which it is difficult to come at, or which it costs much labor to acquire. And that is cheap, which is to be had easily or with very little labor. Labor alone, therefore, never varying in its own value, is alone the ultimate and real standard by which the value of all commodities can at all times and places be estimated and compared. Labor is the real price. Money is the nominal price only. So Smith would say, if you want to find the value of the shoes you're wearing, find out how much labor was put into them. And then you'll have the value. It's an objective theory. There were problems with the theory. But each of these articles, these glasses that I hold in my hand, the building that we're in, have certain properties. The glasses, for instance, have objective properties. We can weigh them to find the weight. We can measure the hardness, the durability. All the physical properties are in the glasses. They would be here whether men existed or not. And Adam Smith said the value is in the glasses. It's objective. It's put there by labor. If you want to find the value of the glasses, look to the labor. Karl Marx was born in 1818. He was raised in the Prussian Rhineland. He was subjected to the thoughts of the French Revolution and the Restoration. And Karl Marx accepted the classical economics of Adam Smith and David Ricardo. Now, you can divide Marxist thought into three elements. Number one is dialectic materialism. Marx said everything that happens because of material causes. He said the architect, the priest get their philosopher and the priest get their inspiration from the architect and the engineer. And he put a materialist construction on everything that happened. For instance, if you would lay this up on cases, he would say the discovery of the compass enabled men to sail the seas and go beyond the horizons, and this opened up the age of discovery, and this subsequently led to the Enlightenment. Or he could say that the discovery of the steam engine meant that women could push a button as well as men, and one day you'd have women's lib. Or you could say that with the discovery of the pill, birth control, women could come out of the homes and could go into the factories, and this would lead to women's lib. These are all materialist constructions. That's one part of Marx. The second part was his economics, and as I say, he took this almost entirely from the classical philosophers, Adam Smith, including the labor theory of value. But Marx put a different construction in the idea. He said if labor creates the value, then any part of the labor that's taken by the capitalist is exploitation. Labor created the value and naturally has a right to that value. And so if the value is in the good, it belongs to the laborer, and if ever there's an exchange of goods, if there's a profit, there has to be an equal and an opposite loss. It's a zero-sum game. So there will be exploitation as long as the laborer does not get the full product of what he has created, that the value is in the object. And then, taking this labor theory of value, Marx then went on to the theory of the class struggle, which is the third part of its system, and that is that the laborer is oppressed because the capitalist drains off this value through the exploitative system of private property. There were problems with the labor theory of value. For instance, the chair you're sitting in, as it gets old, deteriorates, depreciates, becomes worth less and less. You don't get as much for a second-hand chair until it's depreciated for 100 years, and then it starts to appreciate. How come? It has nothing to do with the labor content. Or, if I make a mud pie that takes as much labor as a lemon pie, can I sell it for the same price? Does it have the same value? It doesn't. Or why does cheese, as it ages, become worth more to people who like aged cheese and become worth less to people who don't like aged cheese? So there are all kinds of holes in this labor theory of value. Well, Marx said we're talking about socially necessary labor, but that was a cop-out. That was kind of an elastic cement that put the theory together. In effect, the theory didn't hold water, and Marx knew it, and economics just kind of festered and didn't develop because people couldn't explain why mud pies weren't worth as much as apple pies by the labor theory of value. And then in 1871, at the University of Vienna, Karl Menger derived the subjective theory of value. And he said that the value is not in the apple pies or the mud pies. The value is in the mind of the beholder. The value is not in the glass.